A wave of synchronized bombings has ripped through the Iraqi capital, killing at least 72 people and wounding nearly 200. Ambulances could be heard racing back and forth as massive plumes of black smoke rose above Baghdad. Authorities say at least 14 devices went off throughout the city, ranging from car bombs to hidden explosives. Another 3 blasts rocked the capital later in the day. It's also been less than a week since U.S. forces withdrew from the country, leaving behind an air of uncertainty and surging religious tension. For more on the tragedy and what it bodes for the country, I'm joined by Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn, a member of the Stop the War Coalition, live in London. So the attacks in Baghdad seem to be continuing, with 2 more blasts reported over the last couple of hours. That makes 17 today. What message do you think those responsible for these atrocities are trying to send?
I think they're trying to say that the Iraqi government is not able to control the situation, and that the forces that it has at its disposal cannot impose its will on them either. And I think we're in for a very nasty and very difficult period. And I think the origins of all this relate back to the US-led invasion and the disbandment of the then existing Iraqi army and police forces.
Now, for years, the U.S. and its allies, including the U.K., gave their unconditional support to the current Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, and the same man now being accused by some of sparking and fanning a new sectarian war and undoing what the allies were trying to do there. Do you think there's any irony in that?
I think there's a huge irony in this, because the British and Americans have always claimed that Iraq would emerge from this as a democratic Western-style state, and that Maliki was a product of a democratic process. The reality is that the Deputy Prime Minister has been arrested and apparently accused of planting bombs or attempting assassination of other people, and there's now this mayhem on the streets, and it seems to me as though the Iraqi government is looking extremely beleaguered, and the danger is, of course, they will ask for Western forces to come back in order to protect that government, and so we'll then have a Western-backed government with huge opposition from its own people in the midst of all the violence and chaos across the whole region. I think the West needs to rethink of its strategy very, very carefully.
Now, this comes just a few days after the U.S. occupation of Iraq came to an official end. Now, having been a vocal critic of the war for so many years and largely ignored by many of your peers in government, how do you feel about what's been achieved during the occupation?
Well, what's been achieved has been a large number of deaths, a huge amount of profits for arms companies, a lot of oil contracts signed by Western oil companies, and a lot of chaos on the streets, and a huge level of private mercenary security forces, and the biggest US embassy the world has ever seen, with apparently 13,000 personnel housed within it. And so it doesn't look to me like there's been a complete withdrawal. It looks to me as though there is a security presence left behind in order to protect the government that has been so happy to do business with the West. This could play out into something extremely nasty over a long period. It does require a democratic outcome in the whole country, and it does require the participation of all those political forces in that outcome, and that clearly is not happening at the present time.
And do you still maintain that the Iraq War was illegal and the due process of the law was not applied to those who started it?
I absolutely do. The war was an attack on a sovereign state. It was a war for regime change, when in the case of Britain, the British Parliament was told it was solely a war for disarmament of the non-existent weapons of mass destruction. And the damage it's done in Iraq, in the region, and the civil liberties of everybody in every one of the participating countries is absolutely huge. There's a big lesson here, and I think it's a benchmark in history of the ultimate folly of the war in Iraq.
All right, we have to end it there. Jeremy Corbyn, Labour MP and member of the Stop the War Coalition, thanks for your time.